Hi, we are going to talk about the inverse cosine function. So you're probably already familiar with inverse sine, but a function has to be a one-to-one relationship to have an inverse, and cosine is not one-to-one. Look at this graph, it does not pass the horizontal line test. But if we restrict the domain, then we can make the remaining part one-to-one. So if we select this part, this is what we're going to use. And then on this interval, that part of cosine x is going to be one-to-one. And then the domain here is going to be from 0 to pi. And then the range here obviously is going to be from -1 to 1. So then for the inverse cosine, the domain is going to be from -1 to 1, and the range is going to be from 0 to pi. So what you need to remember that whenever you evaluate the inverse trigonometric function, the value always has to be on the interval from 0 to pi. Okay. Alright, so we're trying to evaluate this without a calculator. Arc sine of square root of 3 over 2. Well, where does the value of sine equals square root of 3 over 2? That happens at pi over 6. And pi over 6 is on the interval that we want. It's on the interval from 0 to pi. What about inverse cosine of 1/2? Well, that happens, cosine equals 1/2 at pi over 3. So pi over 3 is an acceptable answer because it's on the interval. What about negative square root of 2 over 2? Well, if you look at the unit circle, you may want to choose for negative square root of 3 over 2 a value like, for example, negative 3 pi over 4, but that value is not going to work because it's outside. Okay, so if you look at the graph of cosine, negative square root of 2 over 2 is somewhere here. So the value here will not work, that's too far, so we are going to go with 3 pi over 4. 3 pi over 4, cosine at that point, at that angle, is going to equal negative square root of 2 over 2, and that's on the desired interval. Okay. Let's take a look at compositions. So the inverse cosine of 4 pi over 5. Well, as you probably have seen before with the similar problem for arc sine, you're basically trying to find the value of cosine of 4 pi over 5, and then you take the inverse cosine, which will give you the angle. So what angle can accomplish that? Well, in this case 4 pi over 5 will work because 4 pi over 5 does fall on the interval between 0 and pi. So that's going to be acceptable, and the answer here is going to be 4 pi over 5. What about this? Inverse cosine of pi over 8. That is going to equal pi over 8. And that angle is on the interval from 0 to pi. So far so good. And again, this may seem like you just need to cross out the inverse cosine and cosine and just keep the angle. Unfortunately, that's not always as easy. So what about this? So you're doing cosine, inverse cosine of negative pi over 7. It may seem like negative pi over 7 should be our acceptable answer, but it's not, because negative pi over 7 is less than 0 and it falls outside of the interval. So what can you do? You can look at the graph of cosine and think about where else is the value of cosine going to equal negative, where else are they going to have equal values. So negative pi over 7 is here, right? So positive pi over 7 is going to be on the other side. Remember, the graph of cosine is a graph symmetric with respect to the y-axis. So whatever the value you have here, you're going to have exactly the same value for that same angle, just the opposite of that. So in this case, our acceptable answer will be pi over 7. Okay. Another way you can get these answers, do 0 minus negative pi over 7, because the graph of cosine is symmetric about 0, which will give you the same answer. Here we have another one, negative 4 pi over 3. So we do our inverse cosine of negative 4 pi over 3. Negative 4 pi over 3 will not be an acceptable answer. Negative 4 pi over 3 is not even positive, and we want it to be positive for cosine, for inverse cosine, right? So you can think in terms of this. If at negative 4 pi over 3 the angle is going to be the value of our cosine is going to be the same. So if you think about the unit circle here, negative 4 pi over 3 is here. So we're looking for a coterminal angle here, which is going to end up being 2 pi over 3. Okay. So I wish it was easier than that, but it's not. 11 pi over 8. Well, 11 pi over 8 exceeds pi. And again, it falls outside of our desired interval, and we can't do it. So what can you do? Well, if we look at the graph of cosine again, so 11 pi over 8 is close to 2 pi, so somewhere over here. So where else do you have a value that's going to be the same? It's going to be over here. Alright? And this is going to be symmetric with respect to pi. Alright, so you can do pi minus, right? You can do pi minus 11, no, pi minus 11 pi over 8 will not work because it's going to give us a negative value. We'll do 2 pi minus 11 pi over 8, and that's going to give us 16, so it's going to give us 7 pi over 8, and 7 pi over 8 is going to fall on the interval, and it's less than pi. Okay.